Hello everyone, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever it is that you're dialing from. I can see that the attendee list is slowly rising, so we'll just give it a couple of moments, just to make sure that you're all connected to the audio and you can hear us.
And this is where the first rule of business applies, which is the Woody Allen rule of business, which is 80% of success is turning up on time.
Oh. That's your first tip from John Gilligan.
Indeed. You might hear it again if you meet me later.
Okay, we'll get started. I think we have everyone that's arriving. So yes, hello everyone, and welcome to the second day of the experience event. So for those who don't know me, my name is Mandeep Mahal, and I'm one of the MBA recruitment and admissions managers for the Oxford MBA. A big congratulations to you all on your offer of place on the MBA. That's great news. So I know that for some of you only found out a couple of weeks ago if you applied in stage 4. So I hope that you've had some time to celebrate. And then I can see from some of the names that we do have some of those from early stages as well. So I hope that you're getting excited and looking forward to joining us in September. So for today's session, we're going to hear from John Gilligan, who is the director of the Finance Lab. And John is going to give a presentation about the Finance Lab, and we do welcome questions as well. So please do use the Q&A function to submit any questions that come to mind, and then we'll ensure that we get to those in time. But otherwise, I will hand over to you, John.
Thanks, Mandy. Good afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. This will be a relatively short presentation, and what I'm going to do, I think I've got about 15 or 20 slides, something like that. And what I'm going to do is answer 3 questions, which is the questions I always ask when I look at any business, which is who, what, how. So I'm going to answer the question: who are the people involved in the Finance Lab? What do we do, and how do we do it? The first question you should always ask when you walk into any place in Oxford is, who the hell am I listening to, and why should I bother? Because many people stand in the room like the one behind me, or obviously not actually behind me, but technically behind me, and start talking. But you need to understand, what right does this person have to consume my time? So I'll tell you who I am. So I've been doing corporate finance for 35 years. In that time, I've done, I don't know, one of the students at a dinner on Friday asked me how many deals I'd done, and I stopped counting many years ago. I stopped when I counted at about 75, so I'm probably about 100 or so now as well. I started life at 3i. 3i is a private equity fund. When I was a graduate, I was very fortunate to leave university and join private equity straight away. Then I became a partner at Deloitte and then BDO for 25 years collectively. And now I do 2 things. I've been the Finance Lab director for the last 5 years in Oxford, and I also run an impact debt fund on behalf of Big Issue, which if you've been to the UK, you will know. If you haven't, you may not. It's the highest profile social enterprise in the UK. I wrote this book on the corner of the slide called Private Equity Demystified. This is obviously an advert. I don't actually make any money from it. If you buy it, all the money goes to the Big Issue, so all the money goes to charity. But that book is the core text on one of the courses I teach later in the year. So that's who I am. And the idea of the Finance Lab is to share some of the learnings that I've had in my professional career and invite other people into the room to talk to you about what they've done. So that's the who. Then we'll do the what. So what is the Finance Lab? So the key ideas of this, it is by practitioners for practitioners. This is not an academic course. We're not interested in duplicating theory that you'll learn in other parts of the MBA program. What we're interested in doing is introducing to you and exposing to you to practitioners at the top of their game doing what they do. It's entirely case study based. So think Harvard Business School case study and you'll be about right. The difference between what we do and what they do at HBS is that every case we do has the practitioner in the room. So we will have a case where we will give you a case on the week before. There'll be a circumstances in that case. We'll do the case in the class, and then the person who's in that position will walk through the door. And the question you have to decide is, what would you do in that person's position? And then you'll discuss it with the person who was in that position in their professional career. All the people we bring are in two categories. Originally, all the people we brought here were senior professionals in practice. Now they're senior professionals in practice, or they're alumni of the Finance Lab, or both, because now I've been running it 5 years. Many of your predecessors are having significant careers out in the city. So it's a case study based course. If you sign up to this, you're committing to read the case and be prepared to participate in a case study discussion. We also force feed you some of the necessary skills. So if you want to have a career in finance, and most of our stuff is transactional finance, so we're mainly private and transactions and M&A. We're not asset management. We do a separate asset management course in the school. But if you are going to do something in M&A and private equity, you have to be able to fly Excel. If you cannot fly Excel, you will not pass the first test in the job interview. So we bring in an external teaching consultant who teaches the Excel modeling required for passing the investment bank, private equity, or similar modeling test. Then you're signing up for 10 weeks of sessions, either Monday or Tuesday. Some people do both, from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So you've got a full day of MBA land before you come to me, and then you're doing 5 till 8 in the class. And then after every session, we have drinks with the guest. So the structure is 5 till 6:30, we'll do the case. 7, we'll then have a break. 7 till 8:30, we'll discuss the case with the guest. 8:30 till 9, there'll be drinks. Then they head off. There are 20 cases, and every case pretty much will have a person in the room. The other thing you need to know is that this is a call-out culture. So I will point at somebody and say, what do you think? And it's perfectly fine to say, I have no idea. It's not fine to say, I haven't read the case. So it is very similar to the process you'd have in HBS, mainly because they taught me how to do it. The difference between what we do and what they do is we don't publish the cases. So you can't buy any of our cases online. Nobody else teaches them, only we teach our cases. And the people who come in the room develop the cases with us. So what I'm doing at this time of year is I'm developing cases for next year. We have a mix of ones that we've done many times, greatest hits as it were, and then we have our new releases. So I'm working on new ones this year with a private equity fund in the Middle East, a private equity fund working through the portfolio management problems of the pandemic. Last year, we brought in some due diligence cases from Bain. This year, we're looking at bringing in some other ones. So each year they change a bit, but we use some of the case we've done in prior years. The other thing about the cases is because I don't practice anymore as a professional, I can do all my mistakes. So some of them will be successes, some of them will be failures. What you tend to get when you're running a thing like this is you'll get people's greatest hits because they want to talk about the successes. I don't have a reputation to protect in the market anymore, so I do some of the things that didn't work. I also do some of the ones that did. So the second who is who's in the room. This was last year's student group. So about 60% of the people in the room are MBA students. About 40% are from the other master's courses we do, the Master's in Financial Economics and the Master's in Law and Finance. We only take 150 people and we never go over that. And the reason for that is because that's the number of people we can teach in the Excel modeling course. We can't teach more than 75 people in a room. The people who should apply are people who are interested in and have an aptitude for careers in public and private markets and M&A. So I'm an M&A practitioner. The golden rule of teaching is teach stuff you know about, because if you do anything else, you're wasting everybody's time. So it's people who are interested in venture, private equity, hedge funds, M&A, investment banking, those sorts of ideas. Last year, there were 60 different nationalities in the room from memory. I think the highest I've had is 66. So it's a very diverse group geographically. We ask people what they want to do before they join us. This gives to give you a sense of what people say before they join. So if you look at investment banking, private equity and VC, you'll see about 2/3 of people aspire to be in that sort of area, which is transactional corporate finance. When you actually look at where people end up, it's much more diverse than this simple chart, just because life's like that. About 25% or so of our people will end up in investment banking in their first stop. The second most common is venture. And then there's a whole array of things around the chart when people end up. If you want to know what the outcomes were a couple of years ago, I put it on LinkedIn. So if you look at me on LinkedIn, you can see I write an article every now and again about where have our students gone and what they're doing. So in places like, we had Bank of America come quite early on. This year, the whole Bank of America team were alumni of the course. So the director, the vice president, the associate, and the analysts were all from the finance lab in Oxford. 3 of them from my time. The director was prior to my time. So we have a kind of rolling alumni of people around the world. The idea is, of course, that we build an alumni network which helps you and you help other people in their careers going forward. The other who is who comes. Somebody's just asked me a specific question about themselves. I'll come to that at the end if I can. It's easy for me to ask general questions rather than dealing with specific ones about individuals, so I'll come back to that one. So who comes into the room? It varies from year to year because I change it around, partly because it keeps me interested, partly because good cases come up. But these are the sort of organizations that we've had in this year. And the kind of people who come, so KKR, we had the head of impact, HG, the managing partner, Goldman Sachs. We used to have Dennis Coleman, who's now the FD, was the head of investment banking. Ares is the global, sorry, not the global head, Blair's the head of EMEA. Bank of America, the team, as says, 4 of them, all of them are ex-Finance Lab people. Ares is there twice. Are all the cases PMVC? No, they're not all PMVC focused at all. We try not to duplicate things we do later in the year because I teach the private equity, advanced private equity course later in the year. So if I look at these ones, Bank of America's won't be, Morgan Stanley won't be, Rothschilds won't be. Across GIC is a property deal. Lakestar is a VC. The one that I'm assuming you can see my pointer. If you can't, I'm pointing at the sort of orange circle. That's a hedge fund case. UBS is a financial services case if Ben does that. So no, they're not all private equity VC. They're all either investment banking, private equity, restructuring. They're transactional. So ones I have on here that's a different would be we have a restructuring case from the pandemic. We have a restructuring case from the GFC. So no is the answer, but we are predominantly transactional. Anonymous attendee has asked me a question again about the process. I'll come back to that again if I may in a second. So let me talk about what we do. So this is my chart, my slide that attempts to tell you what the most important things we're trying to teach people. All of you will be smart enough to get a job in any of the organizations that we work with because you were smart enough to get into the University of Oxford. So what you have to do is work on something else that differentiates you from everybody else who wants to join the teams you're joining. And what you have to do is be somebody that other people want to work with. The biggest problem we find is the picture on the right, which is the kitten looking at the tiger. And that's intended to sort of transmit, beware of arrogance. And the one on the left, somebody being welcomed into a team, is the process that we as employers, when I was an employer, are thinking about. What we're thinking about is who will fit into our team. Why would you be a good person to bring into my successful organization? So it's less a question of how great are you? Because if you're trying to join a great organization, it's already great. What you have to do is be part of what they're doing and be able to fit into what they're doing. Do I delve into corporate finance, which is different from transactional finance? Depends what you mean by corporate finance. If you're talking about corporate finance in terms of theory, no, because there are theoretical courses in corporate finance that are run by my colleagues. But clearly what we're doing is making markets, valuing things, transacting, making decisions, all of which have corporate finance behind them. So what we're trying to do is to show you what people do in the real world, not what people do in a textbook. And that's the conceit of what we're trying to do at the Finance Lab. So sort of following on from that question rather fortuitously, so this is the Malcolm Gladwell book, which I'm sure many of you have seen. It's the 10,000 hours conjecture, which doesn't really stand up to rigorous testing. So this is that to be an expert in anything, you need to do 10,000 hours of practice. And the Finance Lab is part of that 10,000 hours of practice you need to do to be an expert in this sort of area. Like all of these simple conjectures, it's not really correct. Sweeping generalizations are only directionally correct at the best of times. But that's the sort of idea we have when we're developing it as a group, is we're trying to expose you to situations early in your career that otherwise you'll only encounter later in life. So it's a sort of a safe environment in which to be exposed to difficult decisions with people who are at the top of their game. So I've done who in terms of who I am, who the guests are, who the students are. We've done what, so this is how. How do we do it? This is the important bit. Get your hands dirty. This is learning by doing. And this is the thing that is hardest for people when they first arrive in Oxford, because we have this process where a group of people come from all over the world who don't really know each other. And early on, everybody's feeling their way into the process and who they're with. And we're the first people often that they encounter in Oxford. And we learn by doing. So this is get your hands dirty, and you must be prepared to participate. If your experience of education to date has been sitting in lectures whilst people like me talk at you and you take notes and you think, then this is a very different experience. There is method in it, and there's a reason why we do it like this. And this is the method. So as you can see, this was adapted from work done in the States. The background to this was about, I'll get the years wrong, about 15, 20 years ago, one of the Nobel Prize-winning physicists, I think at Stanford or it might be at UCLA, I can't remember, was giving a lecture they'd given many, many times before. And the question that he asked himself was, I wonder what portion of what I'm saying is actually being absorbed by the people I'm talking to. And so they started doing research to see what the retention was using different methods of teaching. And this chart is the result of that research. And what it shows is that if I'm talking to you as I'm doing now, you're getting somewhere between 5 and 30% of what I'm saying. I, on the other hand, am getting 100% of what I'm saying because I'm participating. I'm right at the bottom of this pyramid. So every time I teach people, I learn more than the people I'm teaching. What we're trying to do is cross that line in the Finance Lab. And we're crossing that line away from this passive sitting in a room being talked to into participating. And the more that you participate, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the better your time is spent with us. So this is why we do it by the case study, and why we do it by getting your hands dirty, and why it's a call-out culture. It's slightly intimidating for people at the start, but I have the privileged position of doing it many times. So I know that everybody feels the same at the start. The extroverts often dominate the room in the first couple of weeks, but everybody tends to come out of themselves over time. One of the things we learned in lockdown when we had a situation like this, where we had this Q&A box, when lockdown happened, I taught half of the year, and the second half of the year I had the same people in a different class. Suddenly a lot of the people who'd never spoken in class started typing in the Q&A box, and all the introverts suddenly started becoming much more active. So part of my job is to get people to participate and to encourage people to participate. And we have a particular way of doing that, which I don't have time to describe now, but it means that we randomly select people to say, what do you think? Here's the situation. So that's the sort of pedagogy, if you want to use those words. Other things you're signing up for if you sign up for the Finance Lab is you must do one and can do both of these challenges. If you go onto LinkedIn, you'll see that we just finished last year's Finance Lab last Friday with the Global Private Equity competition. And that's the end of a series of competitions that we run across the year. The Bank of America competition is early on. It's, I think from memory, you have to submit it in about the middle of October. And that is effectively a team-based competition, and you have to submit a pitch book to the M&A group at Bank of America, who will review it. The Hermes Challenge we've been running for many years now, and many of our former participants are actually at Hermes. So not this, last year's Hermes winner is actually now employed by Hermes, So and Hong. That is an individual competition where you have to assess an investment that they will give you. So the undertaking you give to us is that you will enter one or both of these competitions. There are others that we run as well, which lead to this thing called the Global Private Equity Competition at the end of the year. Process. So coming back to these questions I didn't answer earlier on. So these are the timelines. So we opened in February, and Gemma, who manages all this process, passes them to me. The end of applications is coming up in July. At the end of July, the last applicants will be informed. And if you apply, what we ask you to do in the vast majority of cases, although one or two exceptions are given, is to complete an online modeling and an online corporate finance valuations sort of course. And the reason we do that is because it's important that you very early on have got the skills that will get you through those interview processes. So if, the way the banks in particular recruit is they open their recruitment imminently. So Goldman's will probably open their analyst and associate programs in the next few weeks if they're not open already. So will Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, et cetera, et cetera. What that means is when you get to us in September, they've already been open for a couple of months. The way that banks fill their analyst and associate programs is they fill as they go. So they don't wait until everybody's applied and then take the best people. They take all the people they believe are good enough as they apply. So you need to put your hat into that ring early on if you want to be in that process. That means that we have to get certain of those hard skills to you fast. And the way we do that is we use them as the selection criteria for the lab. So it has two benefits. One is that you get some hard skills, and two is it gives me a method of selecting who comes in. Sorry, I've just realized there are questions in the box I hadn't seen. Is it a must have an understanding of corporate finance valuation to get the maximum out of the finance lab? You will have that by the end of it. Some people don't have when they arrive, but you will. The online course I've just described is designed to address that question. Is it suitable for people who want to go into IBD? Yes. Then we have a whole series of acronyms, some of which are not my market. Yes, real estate. Yeah, essentially anybody who wants to work in finance. I've never had anybody say it was a complete waste of time. I went to a bit of the finance world where it didn't matter. That's probably my shortest answer to that question. You've mentioned only 150 places given. How many have been given the conditional offer? I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't know the answer to that question. You'd have to ask Gemma. Others in here, right? Back to the timeline. So what sometimes happened in the summer is people send me emails saying, I've got a summer internship, I'm really busy, I can't do the exam. Well, sorry, that doesn't get a very warm reception from us because we have a lot of people applying, and the reason we have a test is so that people have committed to what we're doing. One of the things you will find as you approach Oxford is Oxford has so much stuff going on in it that you could easily absorb all of your time just by doing some of the co-curricular things we do in the school and then going beyond the school into the wider university, and you will have no time at all. What that means is people often overcommit themselves and think, well, I've got this option to do this, and if I don't do it, well, so what? We try to avoid that because my nightmare scenario is I have somebody in the room from, I don't know, CBC. If I have Rob Lucas from CBC as the managing partner of CBC in the room, I expect there to be 50 to 100 people in the room. If half the people who apply to the lab are just taking an option and don't exercise it, that gives me a problem. That's why we make people do the exam. It shows your commitment to us and our commitment to you. I don't have a background in finance, I'm taking an online certificate. If you don't have a background in finance, yes, absolutely. About, I don't know, a third to a half of the people in the room won't have a direct background in finance, but some of them are looking to move from non-financial things into financial things. So let me give you examples. Think back through people. We turned a professional rugby player into a banker. We turned an ex-army officer into an M&A consultant at Bain. We turned a software seller in New York into an impact banker in London. So people do change. It's hard. You shouldn't imagine it's easy. But a lot of the point of doing an MBA is to change the direction of what you're doing and give you a chance to think about, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? So yes, people certainly, many people apply who don't have a direct background in finance, etc. Is the admission of finance lab on a rolling basis? No, it's not. We review all of the people's applications after they've done the online exams about the end of August, and we tell people about the end of August. It sort of depends on the timing of, to be honest with you, number one, when I'm on holiday in August and when I get back and when the term starts and what the first date is. I think this year the first date's 18th or 20th September, something like that. So we'll tell you 3 or 4 weeks before that. That's sort of all I have to say on the subject, which means I can give you a lot of your life back, unless you have any other questions, which I'm very happy to take either in the chat or if you want to shout out, so I'm very happy to talk to you as well. So a summary of all that lot is, it's a hands-on, practitioner-led, non-examined course. The examination is really at the start to get you in. That's the online thing. And what you'll be doing if you are part of it is you're doing case studies. I stop sharing the screen and I can actually see more of the people. Okay. Any more questions before for international students who want a full-time investment banking job in the UK after graduation? Oh, this is an interesting and general question. How do you maximize your chance of getting a job? That's very difficult for me to answer because I don't know who you are and everybody's positions are different, but investment banking is much easier than private equity or venture or real estate or property or whatever. And the reason for that is because they have a process. So all of the investment banks in London will have, actually that's true, all of the banks that are doing hiring of MBA students will have a formal process that is on their website. And what I do with most people who apply is I'll send you, I usually communicate by email because I'm 57 years old and that works for me. All other methods of communicating with me don't work except speaking to me as a person. So quite often I will hear from one of the banks we're recruiting, our recruiting's open, and I'll send just an email saying the recruiting's open. The banks are easy because they have this formal process. They open a large funnel, they filter that funnel, and the process is the same every year. You need to be able to accurately and rapidly financially model. And the key thing is accurate. Don't be fast and then try and be accurate and speed up. Because the worst thing you can do in investment banking is make mistakes, because mistakes are hugely expensive. So accuracy is the key thing. Learning to do financial modeling is like learning to drive. You can't really do it in a book. You have to just do it. So think of Excel as a bit like financial Lego. Just go and play with it, build things, learn how to use the thing, and gradually you'll get quicker and quicker and quicker. And then the great modelers are fast and accurate. International, it doesn't make any difference whether you're from the UK or anywhere else. The banks recruit internationally around the world. So for example, JP Morgan recruit from us in the Far East, but not in London. Bank of America mainly recruit in New York and London. Goldman's, we have people in Singapore, London. I can't think of anybody who's gone to New York, but maybe wrong, I don't know. So different banks have different processes, but the investment banking process opens early. It's very formal and very clear. Everybody else's process isn't. So if you see your career in venture, typically a venture fund will will start recruiting after it's raised a fund. So one of the things to look for is who's raising money, because they're the people who'll be recruiting. Private equity is very similar. We bring in 2 different groups of headhunters to tell you how to get a job in private equity and banking. So we effectively bring the headhunters in the room, this room behind me, and they will talk to you about what they do and how they do it. So you should have a clear idea after that. When do you think we will hear back on the next step after expressing interest? So the process is I review the applications once a week, which is tomorrow. And then you'll hear back from that. That's so imminently is the answer. You should hear, normally you'll hear back on the Monday after I review them on a Friday, because the person who works for me doesn't work on Friday afternoon. So imminently. If you haven't, then just chase the application, the Oxford Finance Lab application email address, and we'll sort it out for you. I wish somebody would put continuous scroll on the chat function, because I have to scroll down. Do I have any recommended readings before we join the Finance Lab? This is the point where I'm invited to recommend my own book, but I'm not going to. The book I would recommend reading is Warren Buffett's. There's a book called The Readings of Warren Buffett, or there's a selection of all of his letters to shareholders at Berkshire Hathaway over the years. I'm looking at the bookshelf to my left, which you can't see, to see if I have a copy of it on the shelf. I don't. It's in my office elsewhere. So that's a good book to read, whether you're a finance person or not a finance person. Buffett's clearly successful in any measure, but also he's incredibly clear in how he thinks about things. Other ones, Howard Marks's book on investments, very good. What other ones? I read these all the time, so it's slightly difficult for me to wind back through other ones. If you want to think about the psychology of the way people think, then Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, is the most important book on that. There's an interesting book on Charlie Munger, if you're interested in that. It's quite old, but anything by Ray Dalio is worth reading, although he has a very large ego. You have to turn down some of the I and the me and pick out the really interesting thought processes in there. But importantly, you should be daily reading whatever the best financial journal in your area is. So the FT, the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, or similar. One of the things about being good at finance is that the nouns are different in different parts of the world. And quite a lot of my time is spent teaching people what the nouns mean in the first place, because many of the concepts aren't very difficult. Anybody who's done real maths, engineering or physics or whatever, has done far more difficult mathematics than you do in finance. Finance, generally, maths is relatively easy, unless you're doing derivatives and things in the what I don't think of as finance, but I think of as algorithms that work in the financial markets. They're different things. But most of what we're doing in terms of concepts and arithmetic is not difficult. Would I recommend students who are interested in sustainability jobs at banks? Yes, is a simple answer. So the person I mentioned who was a software engineer is now an impact banker. Emily is now, I think she's assistant director at Big Society Capital, which is the biggest impact investor in the UK. Can an MBA looking at strategy, consulting, entrepreneurship? So consulting, we bring in Bain, and we're looking at bringing in McKinsey and BCG this year. We'll probably won't bring in all of them. Because within the consulting businesses, there is a very, very large transactional element. So about 25% of all the people in the big consulting firms now work in transactional corporate finance, essentially private equity related. So part of what we bring to that is the understanding of what the process is that's going on with the underlying client. So the client will be KKR or Blackstone or CVC or whatever, and they will retain Bain, BCG, McKinsey, EY, and whoever it is. And so you need to be able to understand both what the strategy job is, which is generally not, it's generally commercial due diligence on the strategy, and also what's going on. In regard to post MBA jobs, will the finance job help with this? Well, that's what we're trying to do. It's a very general question that's being asked about, is it helpful to do this? I'm biased because I teach it. The organizations that you mentioned, KKR and Blackstone, I do know the most senior people in those organizations, which is not unhelpful to people. As I've just said, we're working with Bain at the moment, and we're looking at McKinsey and BCG, particularly with their transaction piece, not their strategy consulting piece. When will you hear back from the next? I think I've already answered that. What can we do to optimize reach across private equity and VC jobs across geographies? Okay, so the question here is, how do you reach across the UK, Asia, India, Singapore? Well, the answer is you shouldn't, because that's too broad a marketplace to reach across. The problem with VC and private equity is that so there's no obvious door to bang on in like investment banking, where you just bang on the door and it's obvious what that door is. And so the search costs of finding the right place are very high for you as an individual. And that's why having a very broad target is quite difficult, because what you'll find is that you'll do many relatively low-grade interactions rather than a very few high-quality interactions. So what you need to focus on is, well, where do I want to be? What do I have that is of value to other people? Because when I'm an employer, what I want to know is, are you going to fit in my team? And do you have anything that's useful to me? How are you going to make my business better? And that may just be you fit into the machine I already have. You're a cog that I can put into my machine that fits perfectly. Or it may be that you have some unique insight that I don't have. They're harder to sell. Where are we? If the finance lab applies to finance lab today, when will you hear back from your application? If you did all the bits of paper today, I'm on holiday next week, so it'll be not next Monday, not the Monday coming, but 2 Mondays after that. Because I'm going walking up a hill in Italy, because I've been teaching for the last thing. Online exams, is successful in getting the offer job, would we still have the option to opt out at that point? You always have the option to opt out. Well, everybody is any good as a volunteer, even in organizations where we're paying you. So, people can always opt out, absolutely. And because this is a commitment outside of the main degree that you're all doing, some people will start and some people will say this is not for them and they'll do something else. So we always have a few people who fall by the wayside. Part of the reason for having the online exam, as I say, is firstly to get you some hard skills that are useful to you, and secondly, there's a behavioural piece of it. I'm trying to get people to commit to what we're doing by committing their time early on. So what I don't want is people saying, I want to do the finance lab, the impact lab, or the asset finance masterclass and everything else, because you can't do all those. You won't have enough hours in the day, and that stops other people who only want to do this thing from doing this thing. What preparations should applicants who have no experience with finance or very limited knowledge make now? I say read the Warren Buffett books, a good start. It's quite funny, which is hard to do with accounting, and it will set you up in good stead whether you do finance or not. It's an excellent, clear description. It's written for the intelligent man in the street. So read that and think about it. Do we have to complete the courses of the finance lab prior to the application? Yes, is the simple answer. I'm not sure I understand the question. So the process is you send in an application form, I review it. If I accept it, then we ask you to take the online exams. Then based on the online exams and your application, I make a decision as to which 150 people we have in the room. I reserve the right to say to certain people, you don't need to do the exam. So if you have, this last year we had a guy done, what was a guy? I can't remember. Might be one. Somebody from Goldman Sachs who'd done 5 years of M&A, and it wasn't a good use of their time. but the lab was a good use of their time. There's very few of those, but there are one or two. Does the course run from September for 10 weeks? Is there another start new year? The course runs from September to December. So the Finance Lab runs September, December. We have a long tail because things like the Hermes Challenge. The Hermes Challenge is in January. Sometimes the Bank of America one will be. So sometimes it spills over into January time. And then I run a course called the Advanced Private Equity course in Trinity term, which Trinity particularly the third term, where we pick up some of the ideas from the Finance Lab, but we don't run it in the second term Hillary terms, it's called in Oxford, mainly for timetabling reasons. There are other things going on. There is something called the Asset Finance Masterclass, which runs from late in the first term, Michaelmas term, and into Hillary, the second term, which is much more financial markets related, which some people do. PE and VC hire from both IB and consulting, true. What is the difference of skill set we're going to accumulate working in IB from working in consulting? Wow, that's a broad question I could spend several hours talking about. So historically, the most common route into private equity has been through investment banking in the States. That's not been the case in Europe. In Europe, it's been a combination of investment banking or the accounting profession. Increasingly, consultants are being recruited by all people in the private equity world. Venture's different. Venture is less financial modeling and is much more market mapping and market understanding, and is much more about understanding the broad drivers behind an investment outcome. So those who do investment banking, so if you go and work at Bank of America or Goldman's or Morgan Stanley, whatever in IB, what you'll be doing is a lot of financial modeling and a lot of presentations to potential clients, so pitch decks. That has historically been the route into the large buyout industry in the States and to some extent in Europe. In the mid-market, it's slightly different, because in the mid-market, you don't have the long chain to the client, it's a much shorter chain. So the financial modeling is still key, but also relationship management is important. And a lot of what we talk about in this room behind me is how to behave as well as what to do. Because a lot of what to do, the hard stuff is you're all smart enough to do that. The question is, how do I differentiate myself in the long run? Is it possible to take the private equity class without taking the Finance Lab? Yes, we do 2 private equity courses. Ludovic Philippou, Lido runs a thing called Essentials Private Equity, and I run a thing called Advanced. You have to do the Finance Lab to do the Advanced. You don't have to do it to do the private equity course. Where can one apply for the Asset Finance Masterclass? That's a very good question. I don't think we open applications for it until you're actually here. So I think you have to be here already. I think the applications open probably in October. But it's, as you'll have deduced from my uncertainty in my voice, I'm not exactly sure, but it's not before you arrive. If you had experience in fintech marketing before you joined the Finance Lab, what are some of the career paths? We're starting to burrow into very specific questions about specific individuals. One of the cases we're looking at is a fintech case this year. Those sort of the very specific questions like the one you've asked are a very legitimate question, but it's quite difficult to discuss on an open forum with 50 or 60 people. Each person's circumstances are different, and therefore figuring out where people go is kind of an iterative process. But normally where we do that is I talk with probably half the students in the room will come and talk to me about places they want to go to. The other thing I should say is we don't call you students in the Finance Lab, we call you members of the Finance Lab rather than students. With an attempt to differentiate between the relationship we have in this room and the relationship we have in the other rooms we have in Oxford. Is that everybody? Does any more questions speak now or forever hold by peace? Mandeep's back, that tells me the answer. We're done.
I think that might be all the questions. We can leave it just give it another minute to see if I think there's a couple more that have just come through.
Oh, sorry. What do I take away from this? This one's interest going, I believe if I was right, someone's interested in more market asset management. Yes, better. Alexander, first of all, thanks for using your name. I appreciate that. It's always nice to know who I'm actually talking to, because I'm just sitting here in an office talking to a screen at the moment, but it's nice to have a name to it. If the question you're asking is, do I do one or the other? As I said earlier on, nobody's ever gone into sales and trading and said, I wish I hadn't done it. But I'm not going to talk about sales and trading. So what we're talking about is the generic application of finance to the world of business, often through the medium of transactions. But transactions don't happen in isolation. So I get far more people saying they want to come in and they hadn't applied than I've ever had of people saying, that was a waste of my time, I'm going into trading. Is there any difference between the Finance Lab event 2 hours later and the event we're participating now? No, is the simple answer. The only difference is it's a different time zone, and I might say something different because I am not using a script, as you can see. So I might be a bit tired and my voice might be a bit worse, but no, the intention is the same, to transmit the same information. Sorry, Mandy, I didn't see your note saying you want to answer the question.
No, it's okay. I'm not sure if there's. I'm not sure if you've answered.
Are there any online course and modules you would recommend? One thing I'd say to you about online finance modeling skills is forgive me, I'm a corporate financier, so I swear, there are some ones that are crap and you should avoid them. And some of the ones that are crap that you should avoid are also expensive. So price is not a signal of quality in financial modeling courses. There are some very, very good ones that are free. So trying to think of the problem. There is a website which I routinely can't remember the name of. It's called multipleexpansion.com, which is run by 2 US investment bankers. It's now, I don't think they update it anymore, but it's a very good one for anybody who's interested in investment banking. It shows you how they think as they do it, and it's a very good demonstration of what people do in investment banking. We use Wall Street Prep. On the Street's also good. They're quite US centric. One of the problems you get across the Atlantic is that the nouns are so changed. So I talk about stock, debtors, and creditors. You talk about inventory, receivables, and payables. And one of the things you find is that the words aren't the same. So you just need to be careful. There are lots of MBA chat websites where you can find the best ones, but as I say, you don't need to spend a lot of money on it. Everything you need to know will be on Wall Street Prep, and you get Wall Street Prep for free for life when you come to Oxford. If you come to Oxford. If you don't come to Oxford, you don't. Your choice.
Thank you, John. I think that's a good way to end that if you don't come to Oxford. So well, thank you everyone for attending the session, and a big thank you to John Gilligan for giving us an overview of the Finance Lab and for sharing his insights and his expertise, and also for answering all of your questions. I think there was over 20+ questions that have been answered, so thank you, John. And so I believe the session is being recorded, so we will be following up with a recording. And Experience event does continue, so I believe that we have a career session at 2 p.m. UK time. So we look forward to seeing you all there. So thank you, everyone, and bye for now.
Thanks a lot. Hope to see you in a classroom like that in the summer. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.